Okay, and our last lesson, our last new lesson is going to be about unbiased and biased sampling. Okay, this one's really important to keep in mind, especially because you're bombarded with information all the time, constantly, from the internet and other sources like that. So it's important to think about things like, did they take this from an unbiased or a biased sample? So, an unbiased sample here is what we want to be using. An unbiased sample is used to accurately represent the entire population. Unbiased samples give the more trustworthy results. Okay, so you want a sample that is unbiased. Okay, how do you take an unbiased sample for a survey? Well, two examples of that would be a simple random sample. Okay, this one's probably the most obvious to you guys. Each item or person in the population is as likely to be chosen as any other. So an example of that would be if each student wrote their name on a piece of paper, those papers were put into a big bowl and names were picked without looking. Right? That would be an example of a random sample. Every kid's name is in there, you're randomly picking those names. Okay, so that's a simple random sample. The other one that might not be so obvious is called a systematic random sample, right here, where the items or people are selected according to a specific time or time interval. For example, in that one, it'd be something like every 20th person is chosen from an alphabetical list of all students attending the school. So it's still, every kid is still possible to be chosen, but we only take every 20th name in the list. That one's still an unbiased sample. Okay, you're not picking and choosing who gets the survey and things like that, right? It's just every 20th kid, okay, is chosen. Or every 10th person who walks into the store. If you're standing at the doorway, you sample every 10th person who walks in the door, right? That's you being completely unbiased. You're not picking and choosing which people are going to be surveyed. You're just systematically surveying people, every 10th, every 20th, every 5th person, okay? And you should only use unbiased samples when making generalizations about a population. Okay, because those are the more trustworthy results, as opposed to a biased sample is one that favors one or more groups of a population over others. Okay, so an example of this would be a convenience sample. A convenience sample consists of members of a population that are more easily accessed, right? It's more convenient for you to ask them. Okay, for example, to get a gauge on what all students are thinking, right? It would be a poor choice for the principal to go in and survey just one math class, right? If the principal came in and asked only my 4th period class, hey, what do you guys want for lunch today? Right? It's not very fair to make a generalization that whatever 4th period picks is what all kids would want, right? But it is more convenient to go into that one class, right? So that's an example of a convenience sample, right? Where you can't really make that generalization about all kids in the school if you're coming to just one class of one period. Right? An example of another biased sample is a voluntary response sample. This is where you're only getting responses from people who volunteer to do it. Okay. So it's like if students at a school who wish to express their opinions complete an online survey, right? Some kids who don't really care one way or the other too much won't go on and do it, right? But the kids who really feel strongly about it will go on and do it. So if it's a survey based on like a kid volunteering to do the survey, that's also a biased sample. You're not getting a good representation of the entire population. Again, you should only use unbiased samples, right? So we should not be doing these. We should not be doing convenience sampling. We should not be doing it based on voluntary responses. Okay. So I'm just going to give us some different examples, and we're going to have to decide, is this biased or unbiased, right? Is it trustworthy or is it not trustworthy? So a random sample of students at a middle school shows that 10 students prefer listening to rock, 15 students prefer listening to hip hop, and 25 students prefer to no music while they exercise. And they made a conclusion. It can be concluded that half of the students prefer no music while they exercise. So it seems like the numbers work out right. 25 students prefer no music, so that's 25 out of, it seems like, plus 10 plus 15. Yeah, 25 out of 50 kids prefer listening to music, so that's half. So it can be concluded that half the students prefer no music. Is it valid to conclude that half the students prefer no music? Right, was this an unbiased sample? Okay, that answer would be yes, right? Because we can see it was a random sample of students at a middle school. So this would fall under the simple random right here. Simple random sample, right? A random sample of students at the middle school, right? So yes, we can conclude that maybe half the students prefer no music while exercising because it was a random sample. How number 2. Every 10th person who walks into a department store is surveyed to determine his or her music preference. Out of 150 customers, 70 stated that they prefer rock music. The manager concludes that about half of all customers prefer rock music. Okay. So, is the manager's conclusion valid that half of the customers prefer rock music? Again, is this an unbiased or a biased sample? The answer would be that it is a unbiased or trustworthy sample because every 10th person who walked in was surveyed. That falls under the systematic random sampling, right? That falls under this one, the systematic random sample. Okay. So yes, it is valid, right? 70 out of 150 prefer rock music, which is about half. They didn't say exactly half, it is about half. Okay. So yes, it is a valid conclusion because it was an unbiased sample, right? Systematic random sample. How about this one? The customers of a music store are surveyed to determine their favorite leisure time activity. Okay, leisure's like you're hanging out, you're doing nothing. What are you doing in your leisure time? The results are shown in the graph. You can see this graph right here, this pie chart. The store manager concludes that most people prefer to listen to music in their leisure time. Okay, as you can see here, 85% of the people they asked prefer listening to music, 6% say they prefer playing sports in their leisure time, and 9% said other. Right? So, do you agree with the manager that most people prefer to listen to music in their leisure time based on this survey that they did, right? Because 85% of them said they prefer music. That's well more than a majority. So, is this an unbiased or a biased sample? Okay, it turns out we should not agree with the manager's conclusion there. Okay, because notice where the survey was taking place. It was the customers at a music store were surveyed. So we can assume their answers to this question about what you like to do in your leisure time is a little bit skewed, right? If you're in a music store already, we can assume you already kind of prefer music or you like to listen to music. So more often than not, you'll prefer listening to music in your downtime. All right, if you're in a music store. This would be one of those convenience samples. Right? We just go to the music store and we ask those people in that music store. But that's not going to be a good generalization to make about all people in a town or in a city. Right? And again, this is why it's important to be thinking about these things about unbiased versus bias. If I were just to show you this, oh, don't want to move everything. If I were just to show you though this this chart here, it can be very misleading, right? But no, we got to think, how did they take this survey, right? Oh, it might have been people just at the music store. So I don't want to really pay attention to that because it's a convenient sample, right? The answers aren't very accurate. It's a biased sample. Okay, how about this one? A radio station polls its listeners to see which athlete they like more. 72% of those surveyed prefer LeBron James from Los Angeles, California. 28% say they prefer Tom Brady. Oh, he's no longer in Boston, but in Boston, Massachusetts. Based on the survey, is it reasonable to conclude that more people like LeBron James than Tom Brady? Why or why not? Because the survey says 72% of people like LeBron James, right? So we can make an assumption that more people prefer LeBron James, right? That would be a big no, because we don't know enough information about where the survey was taken, right? Kind of like at the music store. If the survey was taken in Los Angeles, where LeBron James plays basketball, more people may prefer him, right? 72% may prefer him in Los Angeles because he's from their city, or he plays for their city. So what we should really know is, where was this survey taking place? Okay. So again, our big lesson from today is, are these results coming from an unbiased sample or a biased sample? Okay. We want ones that are unbiased, like this here, a simple random sample or a systematic random sample, because those are more trustworthy results. What we don't want to be using are convenience or voluntary response sampling, okay, because these are going to be less trustworthy.